Subscribe to Storylab. Now let's begin. Byron Summers had seen evil in its rawest forms. 20 years with Delta Force had shown him what men were capable of when stripped of civilization's veneer. He'd hunted terrorists through Afghan mountains, neutralized threats in urban Syrian warrens, and witnessed atrocities that still visited him in the quiet hours before dawn. But nothing, not Fallujah, not Kandahar, not any godforsaken hellhole he'd bled in, had prepared him for the particular kind of evil that wore a badge and shared Thanksgiving dinner with his family. The flight from Fort Bragg to Cedar Rapids touched down on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. Byron carried everything he owned in 2 duffel bags. After 2 decades of deployment cycles, temporary housing, and living out of footlockers, he'd learned not to accumulate possessions. The Army had been his life, his identity, his purpose. Now, at 42, with a medical retirement after a roadside bomb in Helmand had left his left leg full of titanium and his hearing permanently damaged, he was returning to Iowa to figure out what came next. His sister Christine waited at arrivals, and Byron trained, I caught the details immediately. The oversized sunglasses despite the overcast sky. The long sleeves in 70-degree weather. The way she held her left arm close to her body, protecting ribs. The brittle quality of her smile, like glass about to shatter. Byron. She hugged him carefully, and he felt her wince when his arms came around her shoulders. He pulled back, studying her face. Christine was 3 years younger, but the woman before him looked a decade older than 39. The vibrant girl who'd written him letters full of terrible jokes and small-town gossip had hollowed out, leaving this fragile shell. You look good, Chris. The lie tasted like copper. So do you. She touched the gray, threading his temples. Distinguished. Byron let her take one of his bags, though he noticed how she struggled with the weight. They walked to her Honda CR-V in silence, heavy with everything neither of them was saying. The drive to Cedar Mills took 40 minutes. Christine filled the air with nervous chatter about their father Alan Case's retirement from the mill, about her job at the county clerk's office, about neighborhood drama. Byron watched the familiar landscape roll past, cornfields giving way to strip malls, then the downtown area with its restored historic buildings and struggling local businesses. Colin's working late tonight, Christine said, too casually. He's been pulling a lot of overtime. You'll meet him tomorrow. Looking forward to it. Byron kept his voice neutral, but his jaw tightened. Colin Foster, state trooper, married to Christine for 8 years. Byron had met him twice, once at their wedding, once at their father's retirement party 4 years ago. Both times, something about the man had set off Byron's threat assessment instincts. Too controlling, too possessive. The way he touched Christine wasn't affectionate. It was proprietary. Christine had set up the guest room in their 2-story colonial on Maple Street. It was small but clean, with a view of the backyard where a tire swing hung motionless from an oak tree. Byron noticed the master bedroom door at the end of the hall had a new deadbolt. On the outside. I'll let you get settled, Christine said. Dinner's at 6. Just us tonight. After she left, Byron sat on the edge of the bed and assessed. The house was too quiet. No photos of the couple displayed anywhere he could see. The living room furniture looked new, probably because the old stuff had been broken. In the bathroom, he'd spotted a pharmacy's worth of pain medication in the cabinet. Ibuprofen, acetaminophen, muscle relaxers. He'd known, on some level. Her letters had become less frequent over the past 3 years. The few phone calls they'd managed had been strained, cut short. She made excuses not to video chat. But he'd been deployed, wrapped up in operations, trusting that his kid sister's life was continuing safely back in the world. What a fucking failure that trust had been. Dinner confirmed his suspicions. Christine had made pot roast, his favorite, but barely touched her own plate. She kept checking her phone, jumping at every notification. When Byron asked about Colin's schedule, she stammered through an answer about shift rotations and departmental politics. Chris, he said finally, setting down his fork. What happened to your ribs? She froze. I fell. Down the basement stairs. Clumsy. Show me the stairs. Byron, show me. The basement stairs were carpeted and had a sturdy railing. No loose boards, no hazards. Byron descended slowly, checking each step, then turned to look back up at his sister. You'd have to fall sideways, hard, to crack ribs on these stairs. Through the railing. Christine's composure cracked. Tears spilled over, tracking through carefully applied foundation that didn't quite hide the faded bruise on her cheekbone. Please don't. Please, Byron. It'll just make things worse. He climbed back up, moving carefully to control the rage building in his chest. 20 years of combat had taught him to channel anger into cold efficiency. How long? It doesn't matter. How long? She collapsed onto the basement door frame. 3 years. Maybe 4. It started small. Pushing. Then shoving. Then, she gestured vaguely at herself, encompassing all the damage. I called the police twice. They sent his colleagues. His friends. They wrote it up as domestic disturbance and told me I should try to be more understanding of the stress he's under. Byron's hands clenched into fists. What about Dad? He doesn't know. Collins, he's careful. Only where it doesn't show. He controls everything. The money, my phone, who I see. He put tracking software on my car. I can't leave, Byron. I tried once, 2 years ago. He found me at the Motel 6 in Iowa City within 3 hours. He dragged me back and... She touched her left arm, the one she'd been favoring. I had a fracture. He told the ER doctor I'd gotten drunk and fallen. They believed him. Where is he now? Route 30 patrol. He'll be home around 11. Christine grabbed his arm. Byron, promise me you won't do anything. Promise me. He's connected. The whole department protects him. If you make trouble, they'll find a way to hurt you. Byron had led raids on Taliban compounds. He'd infiltrated terror cells. He'd survived ambushes and mortar attacks in situations where the odds of walking out alive were single-digit percentages. The idea that he should fear a small-town state trooper and his corrupt friends would have been laughable if his sister wasn't genuinely terrified. I promise, he said, that I won't do anything tonight. The lie came easily. He'd learned deception as a tool of war. Sometimes you told people what they needed to hear to complete the mission. Christine relaxed slightly. Stay in your room when he gets home. Please. Just for tonight. I need to prepare him for you being here. At 11:17 p.m., Byron heard the garage door open. Heavy footsteps through the kitchen. The refrigerator opening. A beer can cracking. Then Colin Foster's voice, loud and slurred. Christine, where the fuck is my dinner? Byron sat perfectly still on his bed in the dark, listening. Every instinct screamed to move, to intervene, but he'd given his word for tonight. So he listened as Christine apologized, explained she'd kept his plate warm, offered to heat it up. Listened as Colin berated her for something trivial. Listened as something, probably the plate, shattered against a wall. Clean that shit up, Colin growled. And get upstairs. Now. The deadbolt on the master bedroom clicked shut. Byron heard raised voices muffled by walls. A thump, a cry, quickly silenced. Then nothing. He spent the rest of the night planning. Morning arrived gray and cold. Byron was already awake, had been for hours, when Colin Foster emerged from the master bedroom at 6 a.m. Through his cracked door, Byron watched the man who'd been terrorizing his sister. Colin stood about 6'2", maybe 220, with the build of someone who'd been athletic once, but was starting to go soft around the middle. Buzz, cut, square jaw, the kind of face that probably inspired confidence in traffic stops. He wore his trooper uniform like armor, every detail precise. The gun on his hip sat in a well-worn holster. Byron waited until Colin left for work before emerging. Christine was in the kitchen, cleaning up broken ceramic from the night before. A fresh bruise colored her upper arm in the exact shape of finger marks. Good morning, she said quietly. There's coffee. We need to talk about your exit strategy. Byron, no. I told you. I'm not leaving you here with him, Chris. We're going to handle this. Legally first. I'll go to the state police headquarters, file a formal complaint. We'll document everything, get you medical records, build a case. Christine laughed, a broken sound. You don't understand. Colin's not just any trooper. His uncle is Captain Jeffrey Adkins, runs the whole district. His cousin works in the prosecutor's office. His best friend is the county sheriff. This town belongs to them, Byron. The system doesn't work when the system is protecting the abuser. Then we'll go above them. FBI. State Attorney General. With what evidence? He's too smart to leave proof. It's always my word against his. And he's a decorated officer with a spotless record. I'm just the hysterical wife who can't handle stress. She poured coffee with shaking hands. I've accepted it, Byron. This is my life now. I wanted to see you one more time before. She didn't finish the sentence, but Byron heard it anyway. Before she gave up completely. Before Colin went too far. Before it was too late. Where does he work? Byron asked. The station. District 7, headquarters on Highway 20. Why? Because I'm going to pay him a visit. Christine went pale. Byron, no. Please. He'll kill you. Or worse, he'll have you arrested. Assaulting a police officer, threatening, they'll bury you. Byron smiled. And it was the same smile that had frightened enemy combatants in a dozen countries. Chris, I've dealt with warlords and terrorists. I've negotiated with people who wore necklaces made of human ears. Your husband is just another bully who's never faced real consequences. He finished his coffee. I'm going to give him a choice. Back off, or I end his career. One way or another. He won't back off. Men like Colin don't. Then I'll adjust my approach accordingly. District 7 State Police Headquarters occupied a brick building surrounded by patrol cars and American flags. Byron walked through the front doors at 10 a.m., dressed in jeans and a plain black t-shirt that showed off the tattoo sleeve marking his left arm. Unit insignias, operation dates, coordinates of places that no longer existed. The desk sergeant, a heavy-set man named Herbert Schmidt according to his nameplate, looked up with practiced bureaucratic indifference. Help you. I'm here to see Trooper Colin Foster. He expecting you? No, but tell him Byron Summers is here. His brother-in-law. Schmidt's expression shifted microscopically, a flicker of recognition, of understanding. The good old boy network processing a potential threat. Wait here. 10 minutes later, Colin emerged from the back offices, smiling broadly, hand extended. The performance of welcoming family. Byron, Christine told me you were in town. Sorry I missed you last night. Late shift. The smile didn't reach his eyes. Let's talk in the break room. The break room was empty, coffee-stained and smelling of old cigarettes despite the no-smoking signs. Colin shut the door, and the mask dropped. What do you want? I want you to stop hitting my sister. Colin laughed. That what she told you? Jesus. She's always been dramatic. Look, Byron, I know you're just back from deployment or whatever, but you don't understand the situation. I understand that you fractured her arm, cracked her ribs, put bruises on her that she has to hide with makeup and long sleeves. Byron's voice stayed level, conversational. I understand that you use your badge to intimidate her and your connections to keep anyone from helping her. Careful. Colin's hand drifted toward his service weapon. You're in a police station, making serious accusations against an officer. That could go real bad for you. Touch her again, Byron said quietly, and I'll end your career. Colin's face flushed red. You threatening me? In my own house. He stepped forward, invading Byron's space. I don't know what kind of tough guy bullshit they taught you in the army, but this is my town. You're nobody here. Just another washed-up vet looking for trouble. Byron didn't move. Last warning. Walk away from her. File for divorce. Leave town. I don't care. But you don't touch her again. Colin swung. It was a haymaker telegraphed from a mile away, the punch of someone who'd bullied his way through life without facing real resistance. Byron slipped inside the arc, trapped the arm, and executed a joint lock that put Colin face first against the floor in under 2 seconds. The trooper's weapon clattered away. Byron applied pressure, just enough to make the shoulder joint scream without dislocating. What the Colin gasped. The break room door burst open. 6 officers flooded in, hands on weapons, shouting commands. Byron recognized the choreography. They'd been watching, waiting for him to make a move they could arrest him for. But Byron had served in enough hostile territories to know how to control optics. He released Colin and stepped back, hands visible, non-threatening. Officer Foster swung at me. I defended myself. That's all. Colin scrambled up, face crimson with rage and humiliation. He attacked me. Arrest him. But the officers had seen. Schmidt from the desk. 2 others who'd been watching through the door window. They'd witnessed Colin throw the first punch and Byron's minimal, controlled response. Under the law, Byron had committed no crime. "Maybe we all calm down," Schmidt said carefully. "Foster, you good?" Colin was breathing hard, nursing his shoulder. His eyes locked on Byron with pure hatred. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just get him out of here." Byron allowed himself to be escorted out, noting faces, badge numbers, the way these men formed ranks around Colin, protecting their own. It was exactly what Christine had described, a system corrupted from within. On the way out, he passed Captain Jeffrey Adkins, Colin's uncle. The resemblance was clear, same square jaw, same cold eyes. Adkins smiled slightly, a shark's expression. "Drive safe, Mr. Summers. Roads can be dangerous around here." The threat was unmistakable. Byron had just declared war, and the entire department was mobilizing against him. He walked to his rental car, slid behind the wheel, and allowed himself a tight smile. 8 seconds. That's how long the altercation had lasted. 8 seconds to prove to Colin Foster that his physical dominance meant nothing against someone with actual training. 8 seconds to demonstrate that the game had changed. But more importantly, those 8 seconds had revealed the truth. Colin and his corrupt department would never back down through official channels or reasonable warnings. They were too entrenched, too confident in their power, which meant Byron would have to take a different approach. The kind of approach Delta Force had taught him for handling enemies who operated outside civilized law. He started the car and drove back to Maple Street, already formulating his strategy. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Christine met him at the door, phone in hand, face panicked. Colin called. He said you attacked him. Are you going to jail? That. I'm fine. He lied. Byron moved past her into the house. Pack a bag. You're leaving. I can't. He'll find me. He always finds me. Not this time. Byron pulled out his own phone, scrolled through contacts he hadn't used in years. Men he'd served with. Men who owed him favors. Men who knew how to disappear people when necessary. "I have a friend in Chicago who runs a women's shelter. High security. No electronic trail. You'll be safe there while I handle this." "Handle this how?" Byron met her eyes. "Do you trust me?" "Yes. Always." "Then don't ask questions you don't want answered." For hours later, Christine was on a bus to Chicago with cash, a burner phone, and contact information for Paige Shepard, a former military intelligence officer who now directed a network of safe houses for domestic violence survivors. Byron had called in every favor, leveraged every connection, to ensure Christine would vanish into a system that even a state trooper couldn't track. Colin would come home to an empty house and a note. "She's gone. You'll never find her. Leave town or face the consequences." Byron knew what would happen next. Colin would rage. He'd use every resource available to search for Christine. He'd pressure her father, her friends, anyone he thought might know. And when that failed, he'd turn his attention to Byron. Perfect. That's exactly what Byron wanted. Because you couldn't trap a predator unless you gave it prey. And Byron Summers had just made himself the most tempting target in Colin Foster's world. He cleaned Christine's blood from the basement stairs, blood she'd claimed was from a fall, blood that told a darker story. He photographed the bedroom deadbolt, the broken plate from last night, every piece of evidence that screamed of abuse. Then he sat down at the kitchen table and began making phone calls. First to an old Delta buddy named Elias Vance, now working as a private investigator in Des Moines. "I need deep background on a state trooper. Everything. His finances, his past, anyone he's ever hurt." Second to Alejandro Carroll, a lawyer he'd known in the service who specialized in civil rights cases. "I'm building a case against corrupt cops. You interested?" Third to Roland Mendoza, a journalist who'd embedded with their unit in Syria. "About a story for you. Police corruption, domestic violence, small town cover-up. Everything you love." By midnight, Byron had assembled a team. By morning, they'd begin the real work. Not just saving Christine, but destroying the system that had protected Colin Foster for so long. The war had started in that break room, with 8 seconds of violence. But Byron intended to fight a different kind of battle now. One fought with evidence, exposure, and the systematic dismantling of everything Colin held dear. Colin Foster thought his badge made him untouchable. Byron was about to teach him what Delta Force had taught him. Everyone has a weakness. You just had to find it and apply pressure until the target broke. And Byron Summers was very, very good at making targets break. The call came at 2 a.m. Byron's burner phone, different from his regular cell, vibrating on the nightstand. He answered on the second ring. Your sister's little vacation won't last. Colin's voice, tight with rage, barely controlled. I know people. I'll find her. And when I do, I'll make sure she regrets every day she spent away from me. You're welcome to try. And you think you're tough? You're nothing. A washed-up soldier playing hero. I'm going to destroy you. Harassment charges. Assault. I've got 6 witnesses who'll say you attacked me unprovoked. You'll be in county lockup by Monday. Byron smiled in the darkness. Colin was predictable, falling into the exact pattern Byron had anticipated. Looking forward to it. See you in court. He hung up before Colin could respond. The trooper would be confused now, thrown off balance. Why wasn't Byron scared? Why wasn't he backing down? Because Colin Foster was thinking tactically. Byron Summers was thinking strategically. And the difference between those two mindsets was the difference between winning a battle and winning a war. Byron opened his laptop and reviewed the preliminary report Elias had sent over. Colin's background was exactly what he'd expected. Complaints that went nowhere, ex-girlfriends who dropped restraining order requests under mysterious circumstances, excessive force incidents that disappeared from official records. Jeffrey Adkins had been running interference for his nephew for over a decade. But buried in the financial records, Elias had found something interesting. Colin had money, far more than a state trooper's salary should provide. Offshore accounts, cash deposits, unusual transactions. Either he was dirty or someone was paying him. Byron forwarded the information to Alejandro Carroll with a note. Follow the money. I think we'll find more than just domestic abuse. The pieces were moving into position. Colin thought he was hunting Byron, but he was actually walking deeper into a carefully constructed trap. Every threat, every call, every move Colin made was being documented, recorded, analyzed. Byron checked his phone. A text from Paige Shepard. Case safe. Settled in. Says thank you. Relief flooded through him. Christine was out. Protected. Now he could focus entirely on the mission, taking down Colin Foster and everyone who'd enabled him. Morning arrived cold and bright. Byron drove to his father's house on the south side of town, a modest ranch style that Alan Case had paid off 30 years ago. The old man was in the garage, working on a restored '67 Mustang, when Byron pulled up. Alan straightened, wiping grease from his hands. At 71, he was still solid, still sharp. Byron, heard you had some excitement at the police station. Word travels fast. Small town. Colin called me. Said you attacked him, threatened him, kidnapped Christine. Byron studied his father's face. And what do you think? Alan was quiet for a long moment. I think I've suspected something was wrong for a couple years now. I think I ignored the signs because I didn't want to believe my daughter married a monster. His jaw tightened. Where is she? Safe. That's all you need to know. For your protection and hers. Colin won't let this go. He's got the whole department behind him. I know. I'm counting on it. Alan set down his wrench. Byron, I know what you did in the army. I know you're trained for this kind of thing. But these men fight dirty. They don't follow rules. Neither do I. They stood in silence. Two men from different generations, united by love for a woman who'd been failed by every system meant to protect her. Finally, Alan spoke. What do you need from me? Testimony. When this goes to court, I need you to talk about what you've seen. The bruises Christine tried to hide. The way Colin controlled her. Everything. Done. What else? Stay out of it. Stay safe. Colin will try to use you against me. Don't give him leverage. Alan nodded slowly. You're going to war with him, aren't you? Really war? Yes. Good. That son of a bitch deserves whatever's coming. Byron spent the rest of the day gathering intelligence. He drove past Colin's house, noting the security cameras, the patrol car in the driveway, the neighbors who probably reported everything to the trooper. He visited Christine's office at the county clerk, spoke to her co-workers, Learn about the times Colin had shown up to surprise her with lunch that was really surveillance. He mapped the town's power structure, who owed whom, who feared whom, where the corruption ran deepest. By evening, he had a clear picture. Cedar Mills was a company town, and Colin Foster was company management. The police, the courts, even local media, all compromised. Taking down this system would require more than evidence. It would require breaking their confidence, exposing them to outside scrutiny, making them turn on each other. Byron returned to Christine's empty house as the sun set. He'd stayed here deliberately, occupying Colin's territory, refusing to be intimidated. Sure enough, at 8 p.m., a patrol car rolled past slowly. Then another at 9 p.m. By 10 p.m., they'd driven by 4 times. Harassment, intimidation, making sure Byron knew he was being watched. He stepped out onto the front porch, visible in the light, and waved at the next patrol car. The message was clear. I'm not hiding. I'm not scared. Come get me if you dare. The car accelerated away. Byron's burner phone buzzed. A message from Elias Vance. Found something big. Call me secure. He went inside, locked the doors, and dialed from a scrambled line. What VE you got? Colin Foster isn't just dirty. He's trafficking. Elias's voice was tight with controlled anger. I traced those offshore accounts. Money's coming from a shell corporation linked to a drug distribution network running through Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota. He's using his position to protect smuggling routes, warn dealers about raids, maybe even moving product himself. Byron felt ice settle in his chest. You're sure? I've got bank records, surveillance photos, intercepted communications. Yeah, I'm sure. Your brother-in-law isn't just a wife-beating piece of shit. He's a full-on criminal. Send everything to Alejandro. We're gonna need federal involvement for this. Already done. But Byron, be careful. If Colin's connected to these people, they've got resources, money, muscle, political protection. This is bigger than you thought. Good. That means taking him down takes down the whole network. After hanging up, Byron sat in the darkness, processing this new information. He'd come here to save his sister from an abusive husband. Now he'd stumbled into something much larger, a web of corruption that extended far beyond Cedar Mills. But the fundamentals hadn't changed. Colin Foster was still the target, still the man who'd terrorized Christine, still the predator who needed to be stopped. The scope had just expanded. The stakes had just increased. And Byron Summers had just upgraded from a personal vendetta to a full-scale operation. Monday morning brought the expected knock on the door. 2 deputies, not state troopers, interestingly, stood on the porch with an arrest warrant. Byron read it carefully. Assault, threatening a police officer, stalking, complete fabrication, but expected. Mr. Summers, you need to come with us, the younger deputy said, nervous. He couldn't have been more than 25. Of course. Byron offered his wrist for cuffing. Should I call my lawyer? That's your right. At the county jail, Byron was processed, fingerprinted, photographed. Through it all, he remained calm, cooperative, polite. He knew how this worked. They were trying to intimidate him, make him feel helpless within the system they controlled. But Byron had been held in far worse facilities. Taliban prisons, black sites in countries without names. This county lockup was a day spa by comparison. Alejandro Carroll arrived within 2 hours, immaculate in a tailored suit, carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than the arresting deputies made in a month. Byron, let's get you out of here. The bail hearing was held that afternoon. Judge Velma Spears presiding, an older woman with iron gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Byron recognized the look, someone who'd seen too much corruption and was sick of it. The prosecutor argued Byron was dangerous, violent, a threat to law enforcement. He should be held without bail. Alejandro demolished that argument in under 10 minutes. Your Honor, my client is a decorated veteran with 20 years of service, including multiple commendations for valor. He has no criminal record. The alleged assault occurred when he legally defended himself against Trooper Foster's attack, an attack witnessed by multiple officers who can verify my client was the victim, not the aggressor. This prosecution is transparently retaliatory, designed to silence my client after he reported ongoing domestic violence against his sister. Judge Spears looked over her reading glasses. Is there evidence of this domestic violence claim? Extensive evidence, Your Honor. Medical records, photographs, witness statements. We're prepared to file a civil suit against Trooper Foster and potentially the department for failing to protect a victim. The judge was quiet for a moment. Then, bail is set at $5,000. Mr. Summers is released on his own recognizance. She looked directly at the prosecutor. And I expect any future charges to have substantially more merit than these. Outside the courthouse, Alejandro grinned. That went better than expected. Spears hates corrupt cops. Lost her daughter to domestic violence 10 years ago. Boyfriend was a sheriff's deputy. System protected him until he killed her. Byron felt a chill. Will she be safe? If she's helping us. She's been a judge for 30 years. They can't touch her without exposing themselves even more. Alejandro checked his watch. We've got a meeting in an hour. Someone who wants to help. That someone turned out to be Roland Mendoza, the journalist Byron had called. They met at a coffee shop in Iowa City, far from Cedar Mills. Roland was in his 50s now, gray-bearded, but still had the predatory curiosity that made him excellent at his job. I've been researching your story, Roland said, spreading documents across the table. Colin Foster, Jeffrey Adkins, the whole department. And I found connections. Other women. At least 5 others over the past 10 years who filed complaints against Colin or other officers in that district. All complaints dismissed or disappeared. 2 of those women left the state. One died in a single-car accident 3 years ago. Byron's blood went cold. Suspicious. State police investigated their own officers' possible involvement and found nothing. Make of that what you will. Roland pulled out more papers. But here's what's really interesting. I tracked down one of the women who left. Mandy Osborne. She's willing to talk. She'll testify about what Colin did to her. How the department covered it up. That's explosive. It gets better. She kept evidence. Photos, recordings, documents. Everything she'd need for a case, but was too scared to use because Colin threatened to kill her. Roland leaned back. She'll go on record, Byron. If you can guarantee her protection. I can. Byron thought of Paige Shepard's network, the safe houses, the resources available. When can we meet her? Tomorrow. She's flying in from Seattle. Wants to see Colin pay for what he did. The pieces were falling into place faster than Byron had dared hope. With Mandy's testimony, Elias's financial evidence, Alejandro's legal expertise, and Roland's media platform, they had the foundation for a case that could bring down not just Colin, but the entire corrupt system. But Colin wasn't waiting passively. That night, Byron returned to Christine's house to find the windows smashed. Spray painted across the garage. Dead man. Subtle. Byron called it in, insisted on a state police report, photographed everything. When the responding officer, not from Cedar Mills, arrived, Byron walked him through the damage. This is retaliation. I've filed complaints against Trooper Colin Foster. This is his response. The officer, a young trooper named Steve Babcock, looked uncomfortable. Sir, do you have evidence it was Foster? I have pattern and motive. He's targeted me since I reported his domestic violence against my sister. Babcock wrote carefully in his notebook, and Byron could see the conflict in his expression. A decent cop caught between doing his job and not antagonizing the department. I'll file the report. But sir, between you and me, you should leave town. This situation is going to escalate. I'm counting on it. After Babcock left, Byron examined the damage more carefully. The vandalism was amateur, rage-fueled rather than strategic. Colin was losing control, making mistakes. Exactly what Byron needed. He called Paige in Chicago. How's Christine? Struggling. Asking about you constantly. Worried Colin will kill you. Tell her I'm fine. Tell her we're winning. Are you? Byron surveyed the destruction around him. Broken glass, threats, evidence of his enemy's desperation. Yeah, we are. Because every action Colin took dug his grave deeper. Every threat, every act of vandalism, every abuse of power was being documented, recorded, built into a case that would be impossible to dismiss. Colin Foster thought he was fighting Byron Summers, one man he could intimidate or destroy. He didn't realize he was fighting an entire operation meticulously planned and executed by someone who toppled terror networks and warlords. The vandalism wasn't an attack. It was a gift. More evidence. More proof for the pattern. Byron spent the night at a hotel, leaving the house empty and vulnerable. If Colin wanted to escalate further, let him. Every crime committed was another nail in his coffin. The next morning brought news. Mandy Osborne had arrived in Iowa City. Byron, Alejandro, and Roland met her at a secure location, a lawyer's conference room with armed security outside. Mandy was 43, blonde, still beautiful despite the haunted look in her eyes. She shook Byron's hand firmly. "Thank you for doing this. For protecting your sister. I wish someone had protected me. Tell us what happened." The story spilled out over 3 hours. Colin had dated Mandy 7 years ago, before he married Christine. It started normally, charming, attentive, perfect. Then came control. The jealousy. The violence. When Mandy tried to leave, Colin stalked her, threatened her family, used his badge to harass her employers until she was fired. I went to his captain, Jeffrey Atkins. I had photos of bruises, a recording of Colin threatening to kill me if I left. Atkins listened to everything, then told me I was a vindictive ex-girlfriend trying to ruin a good officer's career. He said if I pursued charges, he'd make sure I was arrested for filing a false report. Did you go to anyone else? I tried, but Colin knew everyone. The prosecutor, judges, other cops. They closed ranks. So I ran, changed my name, moved to Seattle, spent 7 years looking over my shoulder. Tears tracked down her face. When I saw your case in the news, I knew I had to come back. I can't let him do this to anyone else. Alejandro recorded her testimony. Roland took notes for his article. Byron simply listened, adding Mandy's story to the growing picture of Colin Foster as a serial abuser protected by systematic corruption. "There's something else," Mandy said. Colin had money, more than cops should have. He was always taking trips to Omaha, coming back with cash. I asked once, and he beat me so badly I couldn't walk for a week. But I remember seeing him with these men, scary men. Not cops, criminals. Elias's drug trafficking evidence suddenly made perfect sense. Colin had been dirty for years, long before he married Christine. After the interview, Alejandro outlined their legal strategy. We file civil suit against Colin and the department. Violation of civil rights, failure to protect, conspiracy to obstruct justice. We hit them in federal court where their local connections mean nothing. Simultaneously, I've contacted the FBI about the drug trafficking evidence. They're interested. How long until we can move? Days. Maybe a week. We need everything documented perfectly. No mistakes. Byron nodded. The trap was nearly set. All that remained was springing it. That night, his burner phone rang again. Unknown number. He answered with silence. Byron Summers. The voice was older, authoritative. "Captain Jeffrey Atkins. We need to talk. I'm listening. You're causing problems, making accusations, spreading lies about good officers. That ends now. Or what? Or you'll regret it. This is your one warning. Drop the charges, get your sister to recant, and leave town. Do that, and we'll let the vandalism slide, drop the assault charges, everyone walks away." Byron smiled. Atkins was offering a deal, which meant they were worried. And if I refuse, then you'll find out why most people who cross us end up either in jail or in the ground. "Captain Atkins, I've been threatened by people who actually had the capability to follow through. Taliban commanders, Syrian warlords. You're a corrupt cop in a small town. You don't scare me." Silence on the line. Then, you just made the biggest mistake of your life. Click. Byron immediately called Alejandro. They're going to escalate. Atkins just threatened me. We need to move faster. I'll push the FBI, file the civil suit tomorrow morning. But Byron, if they're threatening you, they might try violence. Real violence. Let them try. Because Byron had one advantage these men couldn't match. He'd survived 20 years of combat. He'd faced real enemies in real wars. And he'd learned that the most dangerous moment in any operation was when the enemy realized they were losing. That's when they got desperate, made mistakes, exposed themselves completely. Atkins's threat meant they were scared. and scared enemies made fatal errors. Byron prepared for the next phase. He moved out of Christine's house entirely, checked into a hotel under a different name, and began operating with full operational security. If they wanted to come at him, they'd have to work for it. 2 days later, the hammer dropped. Not on Byron, on Colin. The FBI raided Colin Foster's house at 6 a.m., executing a federal search warrant related to drug trafficking, money laundering, and corruption. They found exactly what Elias had predicted: cash, burner phones, evidence of Colin's involvement in a distribution network spanning 3 states. By noon, Colin was in federal custody. By evening, Jeffrey Adkins and 2 other officers had been arrested as co-conspirators. The news spread through Cedar Mills like wildfire. The untouchable state trooper, the powerful captain, both facing federal charges that came with decades in prison. Rowland's article published simultaneously, detailing the domestic violence, the cover-ups, the pattern of abuse spanning years. Mandy Osborne's testimony, Christine's story, the evidence Byron had gathered, all laid out in devastating detail. The town that had protected Colin Foster for so long suddenly turned on him. People who'd been too scared to speak up came forward with their own stories. Other victims, other crimes. The flood became an avalanche. Byron sat in his hotel room, watching the news coverage, feeling a cold satisfaction. The first phase was complete. Colin was arrested, his protection stripped away, facing justice he'd evaded for years. But Byron wasn't done, because arrest wasn't punishment enough. Not for what Colin had done to Christine, to Mandy, to all the others. He wanted Colin to feel the same fear, helplessness, and despair he'd inflicted on his victims. He wanted Colin Foster to understand what it meant to be trapped in a system designed to hurt you, with no escape and no hope. And Byron had a plan for that too. Colin Foster's bail hearing drew national media attention. The decorated state trooper accused of drug trafficking and domestic violence. The department that had covered for him. It was the kind of story that dominated news cycles. Byron attended, sitting in the gallery, watching Colin shuffle and wearing an orange jumpsuit and chains. Their eyes met across the courtroom, and Byron saw it. The first crack in Colin's confidence. The realization that he was no longer in control. The federal prosecutor argued Colin was a flight risk with extensive criminal connections. No bail. Colin's lawyer, an expensive defense attorney named Ernesto Morales that someone was paying for, argued his client was a decorated officer being railroaded by false accusations. Judge Mary Holmes wasn't buying it. Mr. Foster, you're accused of serious federal crimes with substantial evidence against you. Bail is denied. You'll remain in federal custody pending trial. Colin exploded. This is bullshit. I'm a state trooper. You can't. Bailiff, remove him. As Colin was dragged from the courtroom, screaming obscenities and threats, Byron remained perfectly still. No satisfaction on his face. No emotion at all. Just cold observation. Outside, reporters swarmed. Byron gave a brief statement. My sister suffered for years under Colin Foster's abuse, while the system meant to protect her instead protected him. Today is the first step toward justice, but there's more work to do. This isn't just about one bad cop. It's about a culture that enables abuse and punishes victims. The statement went viral. By evening, it had been picked up by national news, shared millions of times on social media, and sparked a broader conversation about police accountability and domestic violence. Byron received calls from other victims across the country, other people fighting similar battles against corrupt systems. He couldn't help them all, but he listened, offered advice, connected them with resources. Christine called from Chicago, crying. It's over. He's arrested. I can come home. Not yet, Byron said gently. The criminal case is just starting. We still have the civil suit. And Colin still has powerful friends who might retaliate. Give it time. Stay safe. Byron, what you did. I can't believe you actually. I told you I'd handle it. But the FBI? The federal charges? That wasn't just handling it. You destroyed his entire life. He destroyed yours first. I just made sure he couldn't do it to anyone else. Christine was quiet for a moment. Thank you. I know I can't say it enough, but thank you. After hanging up, Byron turned his attention to the next target. the civil lawsuit against the Cedar Mills Police Department and the State Police District. Alejandro had filed it 2 days ago, naming Colin Foster, Jeffrey Atkins, and a dozen other officers who'd ignored complaints, destroyed evidence, and facilitated abuse. The department was scrambling. They'd hired lawyers, were conducting internal investigations, issuing statements about a few bad apples, and their commitment to accountability. Byron wasn't interested in their PR campaign. He wanted systematic change, terminations, policy reforms, outside oversight, real consequences that would prevent this from happening again. But there was still one more element to his plan. One final piece that would ensure Colin Foster's punishment fit his crimes. Byron visited Colin in federal detention. He put his name on the approved visitor list, knowing Colin's ego wouldn't let him refuse. The meeting room was monitored, recorded, everything by the book. Colin looked haggard. A week in custody had stripped away his confidence. The swagger was gone, replaced by barely contained desperation. "What do you want?" Colin's voice was rough. "To make you an offer. I'm not making deals with you. Not with me. With the prosecutors." Byron leaned forward. "You're facing 30 years minimum on the federal charges. Drug trafficking, money laundering, corruption. They've got evidence that'll bury you. Your lawyer knows it. You know it." Colin's jaw clenched. "Get to the point. Cooperate. Give up your suppliers, the distribution network, everyone involved. In exchange, the prosecutor might reduce your sentence. Maybe 15 years instead of 30. I'm not a rat. No, you're a coward who beats women and hides behind a badge. But you're also smart enough to know you're finished." Byron's voice dropped. "Your choice is simple. Spend the rest of your life in prison, or spend half your life and maybe see daylight before you're 70. Colin stared at him with pure hatred. This is all because of Christine? Because she couldn't handle a little discipline? The word discipline hung in the air, a confession wrapped in euphemism. Byron smiled coldly. "Actually, this is because you're a criminal who thought his badge made him above the law. Christine just gave me the excuse to prove you wrong. I'll get out. I'll appeal. I have friends. Your friends are under investigation. Atkins is facing charges. The department is being sued. Everyone who protected you is running for cover." Byron stood. "You're alone, Colin. Just like you made Christine feel. Just like all your victims felt." He walked to the door, then paused. "Oh, and one more thing. The civil suit? We're going after your assets. The house, the cars, the offshore accounts. Everything you stole, everything you hid. We're taking it and giving it to your victims as compensation. By the time we're done, you'll have nothing." Byron left Colin sitting there, face pale, finally understanding the totality of his destruction. 3 days later, Colin's lawyer contacted the federal prosecutor. Colin was ready to cooperate, to testify against the drug network in exchange for a reduced sentence. Byron learned about it from Alejandro with satisfaction. He flipped, gave up names, locations, the whole operation. The FBI is executing raids across 3 states. They're calling it one of the biggest drug busts in Midwest history. And his sentence? 15 years, with possibility of parole after 10 if he testifies at all the trials. But Byron, there's more. The other inmates found out he's cooperating. He's been marked as a snitch. They had to move him to protective custody. Byron felt no sympathy. Colin had spent years terrorizing people weaker than him, using his power to hurt the vulnerable. Now he was the vulnerable one, isolated, afraid, trapped in a cage with people who wanted to hurt him. Poetic justice. The civil lawsuit proceeded through federal court. The department fought it aggressively, but between Mandy's testimony, Christine's evidence, and the pattern documented by Roland's investigation, the case was overwhelming. 6 months after Byron arrived in Cedar Mills, Judge Mary Holmes delivered her ruling. The department was liable for civil rights violations, failure to protect, and systematic enablement of abuse. Damages awarded to Christine, Mandy, and 3 other victims who'd come forward. $12 million. The department didn't have that kind of money. They'd have to mortgage buildings, liquidate assets, cut budgets. The financial impact would force reforms they'd resisted for decades. Outside oversight, independent complaint review, mandatory training on domestic violence. Jeffrey Atkins took a plea deal, 10 years for corruption and obstruction of justice. He'd be 75 when released. His career in law enforcement permanently ended. The other officers implicated in the cover-up faced termination, criminal charges, or both. The entire corrupt system Byron had identified was being systematically dismantled. Rowland's article won a journalism award and sparked state-level investigations into police handling of domestic violence cases. Politicians called for reforms. Activists cited the Cedar Mills case as proof that the system needed fundamental change. Byron sat in the courtroom as the verdicts and settlements were announced, feeling the weight of it all. He'd come here to save his sister. He'd ended up exposing a criminal network, taking down corrupt cops, and starting a movement. But more than that, he'd given Christine her life back. 8 months after Byron first arrived in Cedar Mills, Christine returned home. Not to the house she'd shared with Colin, that had been sold, the proceeds going to victim compensation. Instead, she moved into a small apartment near their father's place, started therapy, began rebuilding. Byron helped her move in, carrying boxes of new furniture, new belongings, a new life free from fear. "I still can't believe it's real," Christine said, arranging books on a shelf. "That he's actually in prison. That it's over. It's real." Byron set down a box labeled kitchen. "And it's over. What about you? What's next?" Good question. Byron had spent 8 months consumed by this mission. Now that it was complete, he faced the same question he'd been avoiding since his medical retirement. What came next? "Alejandro offered me a job," Byron said. "Investigator for his firm, helping with cases like yours. Victims who need someone to fight for them." Christine smiled. "That's perfect for you." "Yeah. Turns out 2 decades of hunting terrorists translates, well, to hunting corrupt cops and abusers." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, transforming the empty apartment into a home. Eventually, Christine spoke again. "Do you think Colin will ever understand what he did? Feel genuine remorse?" Byron considered the question. He'd seen Colin's face in court. Not remorseful, just bitter. Angry at being caught rather than guilty for his crimes. No, men like him never do. They see themselves as victims, even when they're clearly the monsters. Then how is this justice? If he doesn't learn, doesn't change, justice isn't about changing him. It's about stopping him from hurting anyone else. It's about making sure his victims know they matter, that they deserve protection, that what happened wasn't their fault. Byron met her eyes. "You deserved better than what Colin gave you. You deserved a system that protected you instead of protecting him. We couldn't give you that then, but we made damn sure you'll have it now." Christine hugged him tightly. "You saved my life, Byron. Literally. If you hadn't come back when you did, I think you would have killed me eventually. I should have come sooner. Should have seen the signs. You were deployed, serving your country. You couldn't have known. I should have." The guilt would always be there, Byron knew. The knowledge that while he'd been fighting enemies overseas, his sister had been suffering at home. "But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." They finished unpacking as the sun set, painting the apartment in gold light. Alan arrived with dinner, Chinese takeout from the place they'd loved as kids. The 3 of them sat around Christine's new table, eating, talking, laughing for the first time in years. This was what victory looked like. Not medals or glory, but quiet moments of peace. Family safe. Threats neutralized. Justice served. Byron's phone buzzed. A text from Paige Shepard. Another woman reached out. Needs help with abusive cop husband in Nebraska. Interested, Byron looked at Christine, happily telling Alan about her plans to return to school, to study social work, so she could help other survivors. Looked at his father, proud and protective, glad to have his daughter back. He typed back, "Send me the details." Because this mission might be complete, but the war against men like Colin Foster was never over. There would always be abusers hiding behind badges, systems protecting predators instead of victims, people who needed someone willing to fight for them. Byron Summers had found his new purpose. Not soldier, not retiree, but something in between. Hunter of those who preyed on the vulnerable. Champion of those the system had failed. And he was very, very good at it. 1 year later, Byron stood in a congressional hearing room in Washington, D.C. He'd been called to testify before a committee investigating police accountability and domestic violence response. The Cedar Mills case had become a touchstone, cited in policy debates and reform proposals across the country. Byron's systematic takedown of a corrupt department had proven that change was possible, that even entrenched systems could be dismantled. Mr. Summers, the committee chairman said, "Can you describe the obstacles you faced when trying to help your sister?" Byron leaned forward to the microphone, aware of the camera's recording, the reporters scribbling notes. The biggest obstacle wasn't Colin Foster. It was the system that enabled him. Every time my sister asked for help, she was turned away because the people meant to protect her were protecting her abuser instead. That's not a failure of one officer or one department. It's a systemic failure that happens across the country. He outlined the reforms that had worked in Cedar Mills: independent review boards, mandatory arrest policies in domestic violence cases, federal oversight of complaint handling. Real, concrete changes that made a difference. The testimony went on for hours. When it finished, Byron was approached by dozens of people, activists, advocates, other survivors. They thanked him, asked for advice, shared their own stories. One woman caught his attention. Amy Rose, mid-30s, nervous. "Mr. Summers? I'm from Texas. My ex-husband is a sheriff's deputy. He's been stalking me since I left him. I've reported it 12 times. Nothing happens. They say I'm being paranoid." Byron pulled out his card, official now, from Alejandro's firm. "Call this number. Ask for Elias Vance. Tell him I referred you. We'll help." Relief flooded her face. "Thank you. I didn't know where else to turn. That's what we're here for." This was the legacy of what happened in Cedar Mills. Not just one abuser imprisoned, but a network created to help others. A model that could be replicated, scaled, used to fight back against systems that failed the people they were meant to serve. Byron returned to Iowa that evening, to the office he now shared with Elias and 2 other investigators. His walls were covered with case files. Women escaping abusive partners, men fighting corrupt departments, families seeking justice. Each case was different. Each required its own strategy, its own approach. But the fundamentals were always the same. Gather evidence, apply pressure, expose the truth, make the system work even when it was designed to fail. Christine visited the office, sometimes volunteering, helping coordinate resources for victims. She completed her social work degree and now ran support groups for domestic violence survivors. Alan came by too, proud of his son's new mission. They'd built something good from something terrible. Turned pain into purpose. Byron's phone rang. "Alejandro, got a case for you. Police chief in Missouri, covering for officers who've been accused of assault by multiple women. Local prosecutors won't touch it. Federal jurisdiction, if we can prove civil rights violations, which I think we can. You available?" Byron looked at the photo on his desk. Him and Christine at her graduation, both smiling, both free. "Yeah, I'm available." "Good, because this one's going to be a fight." Byron smiled. The best ones always are. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. There was work to do. Predators to hunt. Victims to protect. Systems to dismantle. Colin Foster was in prison, serving his sentence, a cautionary tale about what happened when someone finally fought back. The Cedar Mills Police Department had been reformed, rebuilt, cleaned of corruption. Christine was safe, thriving, helping others who'd suffered as she had. Mission accomplished. But for Byron Summers, the war was just beginning. Because there were hundreds of Colin Fosters out there, thousands of Christines suffering in silence. Entire systems built to protect the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. And Byron had learned something important during those 8 months in Cedar Mills. One person could make a difference. One person with training, resources, and absolute determination could tear down walls that seemed unbreakable. He'd been a soldier for 20 years, fighting wars in distant countries. Now he was a soldier in a different kind of war, one fought in courtrooms and police stations and congressional hearings. A war against corruption, abuse, injustice. And Byron Summers intended to win every battle. He drove toward Missouri as the sun set, already planning his approach, identifying targets, preparing for the fight ahead. The road stretched before him, long and uncertain, but that was fine. He'd spent 2 decades walking into uncertain situations. This was what he'd been trained for. Not Delta Force anymore. Not soldier. Something better. Protector. Avenger. The person who showed up when the system failed, when hope seemed lost, when victims needed someone to believe them and fight for them. Byron Summers, hunter of those who thought themselves untouchable. And he was just getting started.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.